Blog Talk Radio.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Radio. On the phone with me right now, I have my co-hosts, Tim and Nick, and I also have Linda Godfrey on the phone. We're doing an interview with her tonight on her book, The Beast of Bray Road, and talking about Wisconsin werewolves also. And we'll be taking some listener questions, and we'll start the show. So, the first question, I was going to have Linda explain a little bit about her background and what got her interested in the werewolf.
You wanted to know how I got interested?
I was going to say
something that I really got. Pardon?
I was going to say just to see some of your background and what got you interested in the werewolf.
Well, it started when I was working as a reporter for the county newspaper. And I always was interested in unusual things. I hadn't really thought too much about werewolves. But then in my own hometown of Elkhorn, somebody, actually more than one person, started reporting that they were seeing some kind of upright wolf-like creature. And the best word they could think of for it was werewolf, because they didn't know what it was, out by a little road called Bray Road, just outside of Elkhorn. It's about 2 miles long. And when I went to interview the people, I was very skeptical that there was such a wide range. You know, they really weren't like all friends or anything. There was a group of middle school students that had been chased by it. There was a high school student. There was a young working single mother. There were several farmers. There was quite an elderly lady driving home from a factory job. A couple of professionals. You know, they really ran the gamut. And it didn't seem to me that they all could be making something up or mistaken. And then I found out that our county animal control officer actually had a manila file folder that he had labeled werewolf, because these people were calling into him saying, I saw this thing. I don't know what it was, but it looked like a werewolf, if there is such a thing. And he really couldn't identify it either. So that kind of made it into a newspaper story. And once it got printed, which happened to be on New Year's Eve of the year of 91, turning into 92, it went national in about 2 weeks. And I think it's because you get large thick annals of UFO sightings and Bigfoot reports, but there really hasn't been a collected assortment of contemporary upright canine sightings until I started doing it. And so once people heard of me, they began writing to share their own sightings and saying, I thought I was crazy, I thought I was the only one, I'm so glad I at least can tell it to somebody. And they started out, this was really before email was terribly busy with everyone, so at first they were writing to the newspaper, and then later on I started opened my own websites and started getting email. And after I had done this for about 13 years, I decided there was still such high interest in it that I really should write a book. And that's how The Beast of Bray Road came to be. And that unleashed a whole new flurry of sightings, because it spread the news even wider. And so I wrote Hunting the American Werewolf, which actually became the very first episode of History Channel's Monster Quest show titled American Werewolf. And I actually wrote the original script for that episode and appeared in it as well. And it really features a lot of the people whose stories are told in Hunting the American Werewolf in my book.
So is this only happening in Wisconsin, or is it all over the country?
That's a good question. I'm glad you asked that, because, no, not at all just in Wisconsin. One of the first things I learned when the story came out, one of the first calls I got was from somebody in Michigan who had the same thing happen with what they called the Michigan Dogman 5 years earlier. And it just hadn't gotten as much notoriety. But it was a disc jockey named Steve Cook who had actually written kind of a logging camp song as sort of an April Fool's joke about these dogmen And as it turned out, people started calling him and saying, this is no joke. I've seen these things. They're real. And so they had their whole thing going there. But I started getting mail from all over the United States, New York State, the Virgin Islands, France, Germany. You know, I'm talking about foreign countries besides the United States, the South, just about everywhere in the United States, mostly east of the Mississippi. There were fewer sightings in the western states, but even down to Texas. And since then, I now have them in most states of the Union. And in fact, the book I'm working on, I'm finishing right now, that's going to be out by summer, is called The Michigan Dogman, Werewolves, and Unknown Upright Canines Across the U.S. And in fact, I've got it right up on my laptop as I'm sitting here, and I'm just finishing Maryland. A couple of really amazing incidents that have happened in Maryland.
So does the first Beast of Bray Road book, does that only focus on the Bray Road, or does it talk about just Wisconsin in general, or? Well,
it starts out by telling the whole history of what happened, how it came about, the original witnesses, you know, how it went national, the movie that almost got made. And by the way, there's a movie out there now called The Beast of Bray Road that I had nothing to do with, but we almost had an actual, you know, pretty good production movie. It was going to star Nick Fleetwood from Fleetwood Mac as the Beast, and it was all set up, and then the financing fell through at the last. And it goes through all of that. This picture of him, you know, posing for the prosthetics that he would have had to wear for his face, that kind of thing. But then it also goes into the mail that I've been getting from other states and other countries. So you see right away in that book that it goes beyond Wisconsin. It's almost like Wisconsin is home base, and that I do have probably the most from Wisconsin than any other state. But that may also be because I'm more well known in this state, and people just know whereabouts to report it. But Hunting the American Werewolf, I titled it that to show that it really is a countrywide phenomenon and goes all over the whole country. And I also came up with a lot of interesting Native American connections in that book and other theories for it, because, of course, that's the big question, and what isn't real, you know, nobody really knows.
Mm-hmm. Well, right now we have a question coming in. People are asking about the werewolves. Is there any attacks? Like, has there ever been any sort of attacks or anything like that?
Well, that's a really interesting thing. Out of all the reports I've gotten over, it's been like 17 years now, you'd think that if people were making it up, they would come at me with all kinds of crazy stories and, you know, buildings. And actually, they're astonishingly similar in that the creature's usual mode of operation is that it sort of fake attacks. You know, it will charge or chase people, sometimes even chase cars. It'll growl, it'll menace people, it'll come at them. They think that it wants to kill them, and that it could if it wanted to, but it never does. Just as they get really scared or they step on the gas or whatever, it veers off and runs into the cornfield or the bushes or the woods or whatever happens to be there for cover. And usually does have some kind of cover about it. It's not very often seen right out in the wide open where there's no place for it to go hide. The only injury I've ever had recorded in all that time was one from Canada, up in Quebec province, where a professional from the city was out just in the wilderness by himself, and he encountered this thing out in the middle of nowhere, and it could well have eaten him if it wanted to. It was very close enough that it lunged at him and grazed his hip with one of its fangs and left a jagged tear. And at that range, he said, you know, if it had wanted to gut him, it could have. It just, he thinks that it accidentally grazed him. It meant just to, you know, scare him and then run off.
So it seems like it's more curious than... So it seems like it's kind of more curious than...
Spiritual is what a lot of people say.
I was just going to interject. Yeah, I was just going to interject really quickly. Ms. Godfrey, are you aware of I'm sure you're aware of the Michigan Dogman, correct?
Right, that's what I was talking about before with
Okay. Have you ever heard of the Gable film?
Yeah, and then
The Gable film?
Yeah.
Because I've watched it, and it's some pretty trippy stuff. What's your opinion on the Gable film and the Michigan Dogman in general?
Yeah. Well, there are two films that kind of go together. There was the original one that was released a couple of years ago, and then last summer there was another one released that appeared to be made by the same person. It had all the same things, except it showed what was purporting to be the half-devoured carcass of a man that looked sort of like the man in the first Gable film, and kind of known loosely as Gable too. It was released by someone on YouTube who called himself Quinlan OUR12. And if anybody's interested in my take on that one, there's kind of a recap of the Gable film and what I thought of the second one on my MySpace blog. If you go to it's MySpace, I think it's blog.myspace.com/Linda Godfrey, all together in lowercase letters. And if you scroll back to July of 2009, I have a piece that I wrote there. I cannot say too much about it because I'm kind of under orders. On March 24th, the Monster Quest show is going to have a show on History Channel. It's called American Wolfman, but it's largely about the Michigan Dogman and does involve the Gable films. And I went with them to Michigan, and we did a complete investigation. And I think people will be really interested to see that.
So the first episode of Monster Quest was on the Beast of Bray Road. Now they're going to do a similar creature?
Right.
That's pretty interesting.
Right. The first episode was based on the first episode is called American Werewolf, and it's because it's based on my book, Hunting the American Werewolf. And most of the people who are featured, what we did was they came to Wisconsin and had me round up as many witnesses that were fairly recent that were still around. They tend to move away and do other things. But we had 7 different people, more than you could even fit on the show, just the ones that I could find at the last minute. And we had them take a very sophisticated polygraph test. And every single one passed with flying colors. The producers were shocked. They thought at least half of them were probably making it up. But they all showed no evidence of deception. And you can read Hunting the American Werewolf and get the whole story of all of these people who were on that show. And I actually, as I said, wrote the original film script. It got changed quite a bit, going back and forth in the production. But I had a lot to do with that, and I was actually featured on it as well, and made a trip to Michigan for that one too. And then this coming episode, it actually came about because Monster Quest producer Doug Haychek was on a similar radio show to yours, and I was listening to it and called in just to say hi to him and said, hey, by the way, what do you guys think of the Gable films? You're film experts, maybe you should look at it. And so they did. And then this show came about. There are other things that it involves too, which I can't talk about at all. But as I said, people will find it very, very interesting.
Well, we have another question right now. People are saying, is there a possibility? What's the difference between a Sasquatch and a werewolf or a dogman?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite questions, and I get this a lot, and it's a huge, huge difference. For starters, I always say, well, is there much difference between a German Shepherd and a gorilla? Because that's exactly what you're talking about with these two things. You're talking about an unknown canine and an unknown primate. From every witness report of Sasquatch or Bigfoot, and I get those too. Right in Wisconsin, we have not as large as the ones out on the West Coast, but there are plenty of Bigfoot sightings around Wisconsin. And I personally know some of the people, two different middle-aged couples who didn't know each other, who had seen it in very clear, close conditions and was completely convinced. And one of them is in Hunting the American Werewolf. There. So I know that we have those creatures around here in the same areas that people are reporting seeing the man wolf with the dog man. The big difference, part of the difference is size. That's the first tip-off. The Bigfoot, even though it's smaller than the West Coast ones, is still far taller, heavier, more burly. Anybody who gets a close look, though, the sure thing comes in the description of the head and the legs and the feet. The head of the Bigfoot is always described as looking sort of ape-like, flat-faced. They often can't even see a face. It's just, kind of a no-neck, hair coming down to the shoulders. They don't see ears. If they see eyes, sometimes they're either black or perhaps reflecting reddish. And then it walks flat-footed like a primate. And everybody's familiar with the cast of the prints that Bigfoot are supposed to be. They're a huge, flat, primate-style foot with 5 toes, and you can see the whole foot. Whereas people who get any kind of a good look at the dogman or man-wolf, as I like to call it, will describe it as a very dog-like head, usually with pointed, erect ears that they'll say is like a Doberman Pinscher or a German Shepherd or a wolf, with a long, pronounced muzzle. Once in a while, somebody will describe it as a little shorter, say like a pug dog, but that's still more than you ever get, described as a big one, or a Bigfoot, excuse me. And then with the legs and the feet, that's a huge difference. The man-wolf or the dog man will have narrow at the hips, where the Bigfoot is usually described as kind of wide all the way down. But the dog man narrows at the hips, and then people will often say, well, its legs look just like dog legs, and it walks really well. And you have to remember, dogs walk on their toe pads. And they'll say, but its legs are bent backwards. And if you sit and analyze how a dog's leg is put together, it's walking on its toe pads, not its flat foot. So that what we would think of as the heel and ankle part is up above the ground where we're sort of expecting to see a knee. So to us, it looks like it should be bending forward like a knee, but it's actually, we're thinking of it as the wrong leg joint. So it's something that most people don't stop and think through, but they're actually making a very accurate observation. So, and everybody knows what a dog's skinny lower portion of the leg looks like. It doesn't look anything like a big, floppy, heavy primate foot. So there's quite a lot of difference. One is clearly canine, the other one is clearly primate. And again, it's like the difference to me between a German Shepherd and a gorilla.
So the footprints just look more dog-like. They don't resemble a human foot at all?
No, not really. They look, and I've got photos. Also, if you go to my MySpace blog, I've got some photos of a really good incident that happened between the Washington and the scene. You have to scroll back to June 2007 and look for the Milwaukee man-wolf. But you'll see there's a ruler next to some, and they look like elongated dog and wolf prints. And wolf prints actually are slightly more elongated than a dog. There's one way to tell the difference between the two. I've shown these to Wisconsin's top wolf animal wildlife expert for the DNR, and he agrees that they were made by a canine, although the measure 8 inches long. Whereas the biggest wolf prints known are at most, 5 to 6 inches would be gigantic for a wolf, just gigantic. And usually they're a lot longer. But it's interesting because you can see they're in a mud hole that has also the prints of a deer, and you can tell they were made at the same time. And the deer prints haven't spread out, so you can't say, well, the prints just spread out in the mud because the deer prints are intact. And you can see where it sort of tells a little picture. You can tell right where it surprised the deer dug in with his hind hoofs and sprang out of the puddle to get away from it. And then you can also see the smaller canine prints of the front paws that were along with it. So it's kind of interesting. And it's the same, one of the best stories of hunting the American werewolf is from a man who encountered this thing in the Georgia swamp, saw the creature, and then later went back and saw the prints, did not have a camera with him, so he drew pictures. And they look just like it. I've had the same thing happen from Texas. And the thing is that the toe prints are either 4 or 3-toed. I don't know why 3. Sometimes wolves will lose toes in the wild. There have been really famous wolves tracked by naturalists that remain old from toes, just for that reason. But bears have 5 toes. Bigfoot has 5 toes. Cougar prints look somewhat similar, but they don't show claw marks because they walk with their claws retracted. So I've heard a lot about animal tracks, over the 17 years I've been doing it.
Yeah.
It really is probably one of the most valid proofs that we have of it, I think.
Well, another question that I was kind of wondering was, how often are the werewolves seen in the Wisconsin, Michigan area?
How often?
Yeah, like how often are they reported?
Well, it's hard to say. It's hard to say exactly. I probably have sightings for most years, going back to about the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
And then before that, it's kind of hard to tell. There are older newspaper reports that could be that creature, or they'd often say they were wild men or wild animals. They really didn't describe them well. But it's kind of surprising how often that I do get to report. It seems like they're ongoing, and I usually get at least 1 a week, sometimes more. Sometimes I'll go a couple of weeks and then I'll get 3, but it seems to average out to about 1 a week steadily, since 17 years later.
Well, that's pretty frequent.
There's a monster pastel, or I'm on pardon?
Well, that's pretty frequent, about once a week.
I'm talking the whole country.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I'm talking across the whole country. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you just said.
I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah, and that's not just Wisconsin, Michigan, though. That goes all over the country. And I've had quite a few in Oklahoma and even Kansas and some of the southern states, particularly. It's wherever, and it's interesting because what I like to do, when I write these up, I have a big atlas with me, and I'll go online and look at topographical maps and that sort of thing. I like to establish what sort of geography, what sort of terrain they're in. And even when you think, well, that's kind of crazy because that's awfully close to a big city, there's always some kind of greenway nearby that will lead to a watershed or a waterway or lake or a river. There's almost always available water, which is exactly the kind of corridor that wild predators will choose when they travel around, because they know that the game goes to the water and they need the water themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of interesting, I think. For instance, there was a report told about the hunting American werewolf where a carload of young women had been shopping just south of Milwaukee in Brookfield at a place called Brookfield Square, and they were just going on the on-ramp of the interstate to go home, and they saw what they thought was a dog kind of huddling in the center of one of the clover leaves of the on-ramp. Mm-hmm. And they thought they would get it and take it to a shelter or something. So they pulled over, and one of them went to approach it, and it stood up and then ran away on its hind legs. So you think, how would something like that be on an on-ramp, right near Milwaukee? But when I went and looked it up on the map, I saw that clover leaf, all it had to do was cross the ramp, and it was on the grounds of a huge golf course that was closed for the winter, which butted up to another golf course that was closed for the winter, because this occurred in December. And that led to a greenway corridor that really, by then, it was out of Milwaukee County almost.
So another question I was wondering was, I know how there's all kinds of Sasquatch and Bigfoot-related vocalizations. Is there any vocalization that the werewolf makes, or is there any recordings or anything?
People have sent me some recordings. They don't, just kind of indistinct. It's almost like getting one of those blurry pictures or films, you know, that you just can't tell. But which, by the way, that was my main complaint with that Gable film, by the way, from the beginning. I've always maintained it doesn't really matter if it's real or not, because it's too blurry to tell what it is, you know, and it doesn't stand up. And with the sound, the interesting thing is that you would think, well, if I'm going to make up a werewolf story, I'm going to have it go up and howl in people's faces, because that's what you think of, you know, with a cliche werewolf sound. But those who have reported it making the sound, and most of the time it doesn't make a sound, but when they're out in the open with it, that's when they usually hear it. And they report it as a variably pitched growl that kind of is repetitive, kind of like either a motor grinding, or like if you're punching blend on a blender over and over, you know, kind of it goes up and down like that. And I've had different people who have no idea of each other's existence, you know, at different times repeat the same thing to me. And they say if it's out, they feel it's a warning, it's aggressive, makes the hair stand up in their arms, that kind of thing. And when they do report howls, the howls are never nearby. The howls are always off in the woods, and you can't really completely identify it with a creature because you can't see what's making the howl. It could be coyotes in the neighborhood. You know, you can't really say. But there have been some howls reported too.
So, so these are seen less or more than a regular Bigfoot? Like, I'm sorry, this is another question I was asking in our emails.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that.
Well, I was going to say, are they seen more frequently than a regular Bigfoot in the area? Or?
Something about Bigfoot in the area?
I was saying, are like the werewolf-like creatures seen more often than the Bigfoot?
Oh, I see. Oh, the people report the werewolf-like creatures more often to me than they do the Bigfoot. And as far as I know, I have far more sightings of these creatures than Bigfoot. But normally, I think if somebody sees a Bigfoot, they go to BSRO or one of the actual sites that collects Bigfoot reports rather than coming to me with them. Normally, I said there's some, but and overall, I think if you totaled up all Bigfoot reports in the country and then compared them to the upright canine reports, there'd be more Bigfoot reports than canines. But around in southeastern Wisconsin, I'm pretty sure there are more canine ones. And elsewhere, it just depends on the terrain. But if you go and look, well, a good gauge is, for books that kind of collect everything, I don't know if you're familiar with the Weird U.S. series from Barnes & Noble. There's one for most of the states in the country. Yeah, and I actually did Weird Wisconsin with a co-author, and I wrote Weird Michigan, and then I did sequels with another publisher, Strange Wisconsin and Strange Michigan. And if you go state by state and look at all of these books, you will find Bigfoot reports. They all have chapters on zombie gathered creatures, and you'll find Bigfoot reports, and you'll find werewolf reports, and you'll find, you know, Mothman style reports. And the Bigfoot always wins in terms of numbers.
Well, another thing was, sorry, 1 second. What colors are they generally? Are they like a black or brown or?
That's pretty consistent too, and it's really close to what you would expect from any natural wolf pack. Generally, they're either said to be gray or very dark brown to black. And it's kind of interesting because there's a recent press release that scientists have determined that in wolf packs, the wolves that do show black or dark coloration have more of the dog gene. They think that that's not an original wolf color, but is handed down from when wolves have mated with dogs. So I think it is just as likely to, that you could call them dog man or man wolf. It seems to be equal amounts. But They also will sometimes report that they'll see, adult coat stuffed with silver or gray, which would really tally well with just the idea of an animal that's aging. And then there have been some gray ones reported, like you would see in the natural wolf path. And sometimes they'll say there's a reddish tint for some of its fur, but it follows that natural variation that you would see among canines in the wild.
Well,
you go ahead, Nick.
Oh, I was going to say, one interesting thing we always usually bring up when we talk about cryptids is, especially in America, is the Native Americans usually have a very rich folk tales and legacies of these creatures. I've just pulled up this thing about the Lushi, which is the Navajo the Navajo rendition of a werewolf.
Right.
Ms. Godfrey, are you familiar with any Native American stories of werewolves yourself?
Well, I read about the Lushi, which is supposed to be a kind of a skinwalker for the thing produced by a medicine man. It's considered an evil thing by them. And most of the Native American people have some tradition of a medicine man or shaman that is able to produce the image, at least, of one of these creatures. So you have that tradition of the shaman. Now, other people that I've interviewed have also told me, for instance, I talked to a whole chunk of who's also an anthropologist, and I discussed this with hunting the American werewolf, that in their ancient tribal beliefs, this creature and Bigfoot are both primarily what they consider spirit animals. They come from somewhere else, they come through portals, and they can walk between the two worlds. They can go back and forth when they want, but when they are here, they're entirely corporeal. They need to hunt or, excuse me, that's my dog barking. That's my little tiny white dog barking in the background. It's not a dog. I usually have my son here, my husband is a dog ranger, but they happen to be out. There's a woodchuck that I think he gets set with. But anyway, they believe that they go back and forth between the spirit world, and then when they're here, they need to sleep. That's why people often see them eating carcasses. But according to them, there's some sort of business between them and humans that keeps them from eating us, which really goes along very well with the interesting fact that nobody ever seems to be attacked. And I know that there are some stories of creatures that a few other researchers have had that involve human attacks. I know there's one called Land Between the Lakes down in Kentucky. That's a lot different, but I really can't vouch for stories that come from other researchers because I haven't, been able to interview the people themselves. So, but out of the ones that come to me, they're not killing people, and according to my Native American friends, that's because they're not really allowed to for some reason, which I think is fascinating.
Well, I'm also looking, there are werewolf stories from all across the world, everywhere from Indonesia to Iceland to Haiti to Lithuania. I mean, it's a worldwide phenomenon that's been occurring for thousands of years, and I always go by the saying, there's always a shred of truth in every myth or tale. Are you familiar with any international cases of werewolves?
Well, as you say, every culture, and I think going back to, the very first civilization, there are drawings on caves of people either wearing wolf masks or, you could consider them wolfmen perhaps, and they're everywhere. It became, and in fact, they were really considered part of a lot of religions until Christianity really took over Europe, and then they were relegated to the pagan religions and considered right along with witches, and that's where you get all the werewolf trials, and anybody suspected of being a werewolf, in Europe was burned. If you want some of those old stories, I recommend people look up a book. It's called Werewolf by Montague Summers. It's kind of the standard collection of old-time werewolf stories. And some people who were mentally ill, I think, would take on this persona. You had a man named John Grenier who was a teenager that actually killed and attacked and ate young people and was locked up in a monastery until he died there, still trying to act like a wolf. So you do have cases where people have gotten various kinds of either psychoses or certain physical diseases or even reactions to mold in rye bread that can cause really strange symptoms. It might have inspired a lot of people to get the idea that people could turn into wolves. So there's a big cultural tradition that varies from medicine to religion, lots of different causes. But I still have gotten reports of what seem more like the modern man-wolf from France and Germany and different places like that. So not as many, but some. So it is an international phenomenon. And I should remark too that in other countries, not every country has had wolves native to its population. And what you'll find is that they will still be rare animals, but they'll normally be whatever the top predator is. For instance, in South America, you get rare jaguars. And, in Japan, there's the rare fox called the kitsune. And I covered a lot of these. I wrote a book called Werewolves as part of a series called Chelsea House Press. And I also wrote a book called Mythical Creatures to Them and Naked Sea Monsters. And I do include a lot of those, more worldwide traditions in those books. I think it's Legends and Unexplained Mysteries. Legends, Mysteries, and Unexplained, something like that. It's the series, and then there are different titles. But so really, anywhere you look, you can find some kind of a tradition of animals plus people.
We have a caller on the line, and you're on the air, caller.
Yeah, is there any particular spot of Wisconsin that they're seen more than other places?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Oh, is there any particular area that they're seen more?
I think she's asking where would you go to look for one if you were.
Oh, where would you go to look for one? Well, people ask me that all the time, and my answer is if I knew, I'd have a great picture and movie. I'd go there and take a picture and, proof. The thing is, what you can do, what I usually recommend people do is you can study my books for the general areas where they're seen, and you can sort of get a general idea of the likelihood of where they might be. However, even when you go, I usually go out in the field only if it's fairly recent and the land is accessible and not private, or I have permission, and it's the weather is possible to maneuver in. Lots of times you don't have all those conditions, and even then, even though I've gotten to the scene as fast as anybody could, you just don't normally run into them. And almost never does somebody who sets out to go see one. Because, think about how many times you've walked through a woods, how often would you see a bear? And I know bears are probably far more plentiful. And I also tell people, too, you're far more likely to run into something like a bear or a cougar or an actual wolf or even feral hogs, which are making a big comeback. There's all kinds of things that if you're out there, you have to be really, really careful. I never urge people to just go out into the woods willy-nilly, without really knowing what you're doing and having a lot of experience as a woodsman. I will say, most people see this thing from their car. It's either the far greatest number of sightings are just people who are driving around late at night, and it either runs across the road or they see it by the road and it's eating roadkill or doing something, by the side of the road. Or sometimes there's more than one. But that will probably give you the greatest chance and is much safer, than going out and roaming around in the woods. So if you know where there have been some sightings, and also most of the sightings, not all, there are daylight sightings too, but the greatest number of sightings occurred between 10 p.m. and 5 a.m. And again, there was a place east of Lake Geneva where I had 4 sightings by a highly placed professional from Mitchell Airport who was just an impeccable witness. And I spent the whole night driving around with a friend, and we had an infrared camera. And, right after these things had happened, and not a sign of it. So, you really cannot have a great expectation of finding one if you do go out.
Another question I was wondering is, you said that they're seen mostly between 10 and 3. It's like 10 at night and 3 in the morning?
I'm sorry, it's coming through kind of garbled. I'm just not getting your questions. If you could try
I was saying, so the werewolves are normally nocturnal?
Well, yeah, they do seem to be, whatever these creatures are, seem to be much more active at night. And a lot of the times, when I say daytime sightings, I'm talking about dusk or dawn, which means that they're just starting to come out or going home, there's a reason to be out. Just once in a while, they'll be out in broad daylight. And there are those sightings, so I can't say they're totally nocturnal. But they tend to probably go out whenever they think the hunting is best. I have a feeling.
Well, another thing was, I know you probably get asked this a lot, and we have somebody asking, have you ever seen one, like a in person?
Well, I may have seen part of one. And I talk about this in the book that I'm writing right now, but it happened the first time that I went to Michigan with my class, and we were on a very isolated road out in the country with several witnesses who they had all had a couple of sightings because there was a place that was sort of known to be a hangout. And they had actually seen 2 different individuals, one that was taller and gray and one that was a little shorter and had dark brown fur. And we had like a spotlight set up, and there was a History Channel cameraman and there were these people who would come in their car and nobody else around. It's like a dirt road surrounded by mosquito-infested woods and fields, no population. Nobody could have sneaked up without us knowing it, that's for sure. And something was running around just outside the perimeter of our spotlight and showing his yellow eyes. And then at one point, and also I heard something shake itself out in the bushes only about 30 feet away from me that was unmistakably the sound of a dog shaking its coat out. If anybody owns a dog, they know what that sound is. So something was around, and then I happened to look down the road, and just outside the light, catching the light, was the edge of some creature's fur. It looked gray, and it was vertical. And it was kind of like, when you just catch the outside edge of some fur in the light and the rest is in shadow. So I couldn't see the head, I couldn't see the legs. What I did see was that it blotted out a reflective street sign that was at the side of the gravel road. And when we measured, that meant it would have had to have been over 6 feet tall to do that. Mm-hmm. And one of the other witnesses saw it at the same time as me, so it wasn't just my imagination. So I may have seen it, part of one, but I can't prove it because I didn't see the head or just see the legs. I just saw something 7 feet tall with gray fur ran across the road.
Well, another thing, what was I going to say? Why did you want to focus your book on the Beast of Bray Road, just that one book? Like, why did you want to base your book on that rather than the whole Wisconsin area?
Well, because the first the title got kind of well known, and it was something that people could kind of latch on to, and because it started there. Even though I later found earlier sightings and in many other places, Bray Road was the place where the first cluster of reported sightings occurred. And if not for that, the publicity that came from it, it probably would have never gone any farther, and people would still be saying they were seeing, Bigfoot with dog faces out there, which is, what happened in a lot of cases. So it just seems to be the natural name for it. And it was titled, actually, The Beast of Bray Road, Tailing Wisconsin's Werewolf. But then it went on beyond that, too, to other places that I knew of. And then Hunting the American Werewolf, just expanded it much more.
Another question that we're getting asked right now was, have you ever been on I don't know the way you would say, like an expedition, like get a big group of people and go camping for a couple of weeks in the middle of the forest? Is there something to look for?
Well, not a couple of weeks, but I have done nighttime breakouts where we put out bait, we set up with game cameras and hidden cameras. And again, this is where it's been recent, where we get permission to go on the land. And anything smelly, I like to open cans of cat food because you can smell those forever. They make good bait. And then you set up the cameras, and we station in different spots with walkie-talkies and just sit quietly. Probably anything with a nose like a wolf is going to know you're there and avoid you, because their senses are so much better than ours. Even though we had the advice is that you hang any clothing that you're going to wear outdoors for a few days, so it loses that indoor scent, and that you not use perfumes or hairspray or anything like that for a few weeks. So, but still you smell like a human, even if you do all that. So there's a lot of things against it working, but I'm still always wanting to give it a try if possible. And when I do get a chance, I go on site and do what I can to see what's there. And of course, you're looking for not only prints, but hopefully fur clumps. So, of course, the gold standard would be to get several clear, incontrovertible shots or film, minutes of film or something. That would be the top prize in my book.
We have somebody right now, actually, that just sent us an email saying that they got a couple nights ago. They got a call from one of their friends. They said that they taped one of the I guess it's a werewolf creature. They said they taped a call from it, and I was going to say, would you be interested if I could send that to you? Sure,
I would love to emphasize that I continue to take reports, and I'm glad to get them. The easiest way is go to beastofbrayroad.com, and on the main layer page, there's a little graph where you can click on different little icons, and there's one where it says send a report. And everything comes straight to me. I have no assistance or anything like that, so nobody else will see it but me. And you can tell me whether you want your name given or not. I keep people completely anonymous if they want to, as long as I have their contact information. So you don't have to worry about becoming known for it. But yes, I'm definitely I'm not quite done with the book. There's still time to stick things in. And besides, every sighting that I get adds to the body of knowledge. And you never know when one of them will just have the right clue that will help us figure out what this creature is.
But so I was just wondering, so people that want to report a sighting to you rather than go to the BFRO or anybody, would they just go to your website, or is there a different website, or?
Right, it's a website called Beast of Bray Road, BeastofBrayroad, beastofbrayroad.com. And you'll see on the main page, you can just click to report a sighting, or any email that you send to. And I also have another site called weirdmichigan.com that you can also send send me messages too. You can follow me on Twitter as Linda S. as in Susan Godfrey. Send me a direct message if you want. And then I have a MySpace blog. You can write to me, on MySpace too. So all kinds of different ways. I'm not too hard to get a hold of.
And another thing, somebody right now is asking us if they want to see any of these footprint casts. Is there any museums or anywhere that would have those on display where people could look at them?
My book?
People are wondering if there's any footprint casts of the. They're wondering if there's any footprint casts. Is there any way that they could look at them, like at a museum or anything?
There aren't any good casts that I know of. I have tried taking some, and the one that I did was the one where I had the plaster appearance with me. The prints were in mulch, and even though I lined them with saran wrap, it still leaked out, and they didn't turn out good. I have photos, but not good casts. I'm still waiting to get a really good cast. So, and I could have gotten probably pretty good casts from that mud hole. Go to my MySpace blog. Just under Linda Godfrey on MySpace blog, and scroll back to June 2007, and you'll see the Milwaukee Man Wolf, and you can see a pretty good photo there. And in the books, there are some copies of photos. I had another one that was pretty good, taken in Williams Bay. The photos are really better so far working out for me than the plaster cast, but I'm hoping to get one of those soon.
Well, people right now are asking me also, what do the werewolf creatures eat?
What does it eat?
Yeah, like what do they eat?
Very, very, very often, people observe it holding some kind of animal carcass in its front forelimbs. There seems to be a good reason for it to be motivated to walk up it, because it's a lot safer to carry something in your forelimbs than in your mouth. You're up higher, people can't, or other predators have a harder time taking it away. It seems very opportunistic. The parts of deer carcasses, raccoons, that numerous people have seen it chasing deer. So there's evidence that way that it hunts. It seems to go after whatever type of small game that a wolf would go after, or a bear, or some other large predator.
So they generally they eat. They're not. I'm thinking of the word. Sorry, I went blank. They're not herbivores or anything. They eat meat.
Well, they seem to eat meat. Oh, and I should mention, I've had several witnesses report encountering one in their yard or their farmyard, either with their pet cat in its mouth. One person reported seeing it tear apart their pet white dog. And I've had other reports, a couple of places with frequented mobile home parks, and people notice all the cats are disappearing. I've also had people who live on farms report seeing it lurking about the chicken coop or other small animal pens. So whatever it is, it's not about going after either something that's been freshly killed by a car or pets or other small game.
Do you have any questions, Nick?
I was just trying to see if I could find any casts, but I tried to Google it, and nothing came up. I did look up, though. There seems to be a phenomenon that goes on in someplace out in Ohio, Delphos, Ohio. Do you know anything, Linda, about the legends of Delphos, Ohio?
Yes, it's funny you should mention that, because I just wrote about that for my new book, and in fact, I was able to track down the original reporter that wrote the story about it, and found out that when he wrote his story of the werewolves of Delphos, supposedly it was that it went back to almost pre-settler times, when the early mid-1800s, and there's a big swamp area out there called the Great Black Swamp. And supposedly, when they tried to build a town there, the town and the cemetery were overrun with werewolf type of things. And what he told me was that he was on deadline for a Halloween story, and he just kind of took some old campfire tales and sort of ran with them. So he said he didn't really put much stock in those stories other than his very old campfire tales. So it's hard telling whether, they got handed down and changed from actual settler sightings of wolves that probably did live in the Great Swamp at one time, or if they really was something else. But, when I asked him for more concrete details and other stories, and he just didn't have them, he was just he just kind of took off on very old rumors of campfire stories that he heard from his dad long ago, and that's pretty much all there was to that.
Yeah, that's I just pulled off a quick article off cryptomundo.com, and it elaborated a little bit on that, about the campfire stories and so on. It says the area is too populated nowadays to support anything.
I found that too, but it's one reason I do try to go to the source if I can, because when you find things on the internet sites like that, and I realize I have internet sites too, but not everybody goes and checks on these things. And it's one thing to report them as rumors, and I've done that too. And the Weird Series really does do just that. It reports things as legends and rumors. And those are fine, and they're fun, and sometimes they do refer to real things that happened. You just don't know when there is a kernel of truth behind something. But in this case, having just checked it with the person who wrote the original newspaper story, there doesn't seem to be much of substance behind it.
Well, we have about 2 minutes left in the show. We still have a whole bunch of questions to come in, so we'll probably have to do a follow-up interview, probably in a couple months or something, probably a month or two. If you wanted to say your website or any other information you wanted the listeners to know if they want to contact you or get a hold of any of your books.
Well, again, the site is eastofbrayroad.com, B-R-A-Y road, and you will find links to my other things there. The best thing right now, I'm really updating the most is Twitter. When I get something in or have other comments, and it's just under Linda S. Godfrey. With Linda S. Godfrey on Twitter. Then there's WeirdsMichigan.com. You can contact me through there. And then I have a MySpace blog under just Linda Godfrey. But on Twitter, it's Linda S. Godfrey.
Oh, all right. Thank you for doing the show with us again, Linda.
We'll
have a follow-up show in a couple weeks or something. All right. Thanks again, Linda.
All right. Thanks again. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.